Good afternoon, everyone. Right. Just a single question. Does anyone else in the room feel as though they have been drinking from a hose of inspiration all day? Right, note to self, when Tara and Laura say, JP, would you mind coming and chairing a session? And you say, yes, I'd be delighted because I'm super supportive. Don't let them not tell you what session you have. Graveyard. Who thought that was a good idea? How do you follow Thea and that panel? I'm sorry, it is just extraordinary. So, welcome to the best panel of the day, obviously. Thank you. Not because of me, I hasten to add. I stand here today on the shoulders of giants. These women, like every other panelist, are extraordinary. However, I feel vaguely like I'm about to start a joke. What happens when you walk into a room with an English woman, a Scottish woman, an Irish woman? Instead, I'm walking into a room with an athlete, a lawyer, a politician, and a thought leader, and me. Now, if any of you know the television program Sesame Street, one of these things is not like the others. That's how we're going to start. The top. Oh, we're down for Kelly. Kelly, take my chair and I'll stand here. Sure. Yeah, no chair required. There we go. Thank you. Don't worry. In fact, I'm happy to stand. Yeah, because I can be out of the way. Transition in life full stop is a daunting thing. I read an article recently in The Economist that the generation that has currently entered the workforce can expect to change careers, not jobs, but careers 3 times. Now that's a daunting prospect for me, if I'm honest. I've been in the same career since I was sort of, not that long ago, obviously. But it's a frightening prospect to think that you have to start thinking about where you want to be when you're 15 years of age. And as an athlete, all of us have been inspired today by listening to athletes, from Farah and Sharifa this morning, all the way through to the lineup of women we have just heard from. In their focus in life, it's the field of play. Full stop, end of story. And when that finishes, it's a question mark of an incredible size. 96%, 94%, corrected by Rowena, who corrected me before, 94% of C-suite women come from a sporting background. It's an extraordinary statement, that. 69% of women in leadership roles have come from sport in their world, and they can attribute their success, their ambition, the way that they lead, to having been involved in sport. And yet, it's only 1 to 5% of high-performance athletes who, in their own words, don't feel that they transitioned well. I was asked by an Olympic athlete a number of years ago who was going into her first board meeting, JP, how do I ask a question? Like, raise your hand. The room is quite daunting. And it did take me back. I was put on a committee for a federation that I will not say because it's not fair, but let's say I was on the women's committee. It was my first meeting and I was only 27, so it was approximately 3 years ago. Less of the laughter, thank you very much. And I walked in at exactly 2:15, the meeting was at 2:30. I walked in the room, the chairman was a man. The other 5 members of this committee were men. I turned to my right, drew myself up to my very tall 5'6" on a good day and 5'4" on most other days, and I poured myself a cup of tea. And as I turned round, the chairman's exact words were, and here she is, our little bit of pink. I'll be honest, when you're 27 years of age and you're trying to not suffer from the imposter syndrome, it felt as though someone had shot me. And I kept thinking, actually, sir, I think you'll find that I'm fuchsia, not pink. Sat down and then put my hands that were trembling under the table because I wasn't sure how that would go, and said nothing else in the meeting. Transition from the field of play to the boardroom to an executive role is not an easy thing. Today, we have 5 women who have either experienced it personally, witnessed it at the coalface, and the intention is to have an inspiration from them to understand how could we help those athletes? Could we learn from that transition in another way? And once you're on the dark side, can you provide the inspiration back? My inspiration to all of you is do not change your prescription on your glasses the day before you're chairing a panel and use your phone for your notes. Please forgive me, I'm going to do a lot of this and I apologize. I thought I could be seamless and elegant, but that's definitely not going to happen, unfortunately. Please let me introduce my panel. I said, we decided earlier, we're not going to go down the row. Those women's faces you have in your brochure, and I think a large proportion of you will either recognize them from the field of play or indeed from BBC News one way or t'other. But what we have is people who have executed from strategy to operations, from broadcast to workforce, every facet of the sporting ecosystem. And I'm going to pick on our previous lawyer, previous 100-meter sprinter first. Rowena, when you did all of the broadcast and the organizational thinking around sponsorship deals, etc., and you were working with athletes themselves, what do you think the perception is of athletes transitioning? And, sorry, and I didn't share this with you in advance, so it's a bit of a surprise. Do you think the perception of those athletes' transition changes if it's a female athlete to a male athlete?
There's a lot in there, JP.
Yeah.
I think, first of all, I think the perception of athletes has changed over time. So I started my career as a lawyer in the early 2000s, working with UEFA when I was brought in specifically to disrupt what was then an all-male sales team. And there were a lot of egos in the room, and it was really quite problematic. So I was brought in to bring some different thinking, actually, in that perspective. I think back then we didn't really speak to that athletes that much. You know, athletes were seen as assets. They had a role on the pitch, but it was very separate to the organisational aspects of events. I think you fast forward to where we are today, and it's a very different perspective. Athletes, as we've just heard from that amazing panel before, are front and centre of everything we do, and it's been a challenging transition to that space, because certainly, just even giving that voice to athletes has been challenging, because people were like, oh, do we bring political views into this? Do we bring all these sorts of things? Do we give these athletes a voice? Do they know enough about this side of the business? But yeah, of course they do, because they're the ones, and I'm very, very fortunate to have sort of been at every single stage of an event, so even being in the call room with the athletes before they go out onto the stage, onto the field, and understanding what's going through their minds, and probably yes, having been in that position as an athlete, I think has helped me to understand all those things. So I think the perception of athletes has changed. I think it's still, I think they still need that guidance and support. I don't think it's fair for us to just look at athletes and say, oh, okay, you now should be in this role because you've participated in that way. I do think there's a difference for women. I've got a similar tea story to you. I wasn't even said, I was told that I was there to make the tea, actually. But it was a brilliant moment, because I sort of sat down and looked around, and the sort of look on their faces when they realised that I was actually chairing the meeting and was in charge of the outcomes.
Did you make the tea first?
I actually said, no thanks, I don't want any. But, I think there is that sort of support that we need to give to athletes, and especially, I think, for women athletes, because there is still that perception. I'm sad to say that I still, especially on the sales side, I think someone put in a WhatsApp group the other day when the relevant senior team was announced, and it was all men. And I said, well, there aren't that many women on the sales side, because we don't support them on that journey. So we all have a role in helping them to sort of show them what those opportunities are. It's not just being a broadcaster. There's like managing the football team. There's all these other roles that you can do. There's being a lawyer. And actually, I think some of these women are already thinking about that, because we're not the same as the men. Like the men go into sport and know that they've got a career ahead of them. Women are always sort of thinking, what if I don't succeed? Or what if, I can't, I won't earn enough money to have this as a full-time career. So a lot of athletes that I'm sure many of us mentor up here are already thinking they're playing, but they're already thinking, what are they doing next? And I think having that guidance to support them on that transition is really important, so that they don't find themselves in a situation where they are just bewildered and don't know what to say, because they have so much to give to the entire environment and every aspect of what we're doing, and not just the performance-based things.
Thank you very much. Kelly, as someone who spearheaded the women's professional game, the optics of a female athlete entering the working environment, what challenges did you face?
Well, I wasn't an elite. Is this working? Okay. I've got no chair, no. Destined not to speak at the end.
Hang on. Oh, that does work.
Can you hear me okay?
No. Try that one.
Is that one? Right, I've got a chair, I've got a microphone. What was the question? It's to teach me to rush in at the last second. I'm just speaking at a conference down the road. What challenges in transitioning? Yeah, I think, well, I've sort of seen a big journey of women's football where originally the players were working full-time and were amateur athletes, and then obviously we've been moving them into professional football over the last few years as full-time professional athletes, and then trying to then sort of run behind that and think they're not going to come out with 6 Bentleys and multi-millions, and we need to be supporting their careers. And then sort of, whilst we're building professional football, build sort of a dual career approach, so, you know, embedding our academies alongside education institutes, and trying to support, particularly with the PFA, the union, post-career support. I think what I've seen is not terribly systemic. You'll know, obviously got people on much closer on the panel to me that can sort of talk about their experiences firsthand. I've been
Please don't jump my question, okay?
The governing body side, trying to sort of to build it. But I think there could still be probably a more kind of systematic approach, an intentional approach to supporting athletes, particularly outside of, yes, you know, there's opportunities to go in broadcasting, there's opportunities to go in coaching and management, but the game needs women from the game desperately in the governance and leadership of the sport. And I think, you know, the athletes aren't a homogenous group. They're not all going to make and want to be great coaches or broadcasters, and they've all got different skills to bring to the table. But from my perspective, the women's game desperately needs more player voices in senior leadership and in the governance of the game, and the player-centred perspective. We talk a lot about being player-centred. There are challenges around truly delivering that. The lack of player voices and players who've come through the game then leading the game, you know, has to be addressed, I think. So I think we've done some good stuff. Lots more to do, but I think around some of the wider roles in the industry, and particularly sort of leadership and governance, really key that we do more.
And can you see what you would put in place to enable that to happen?
Well, I think whether that's sort of multi-sport partnerships, people are going to tell me now they exist, and I'm sure they do exist, and there'll be, just like a lot of things, there'll be lots of little bits of programmes going on, but whether football needs to do more, be more intentional, or sport needs to be more intentional about identifying women who want leadership and governance roles as outside of other careers in the industry, and being really intentional about supporting and placing those women. There are pockets of stuff with pockets of budget, but I think a lot more could be done to make sure that we pull some of those players through who want to take on the leadership of the sport. And they will bring unique and new perspectives that aren't always in the boardrooms, that I think would really add value.
I think I would agree, and I know there's a question which will come at the end from Tracy around how important it is for education of elite athletes as they're coming through their career to recognise what's possible, because often they don't actually even recognise that they have the opportunity to do something outside of your classic broadcasting coaching, where there's a plethora of opportunities. Which takes me to the commercial manager of Chelsea Football Club. 27 caps.
Sounds very professional.
Thank you very much. 27 caps for England. Carly, as the most recently retired athlete, how did it feel to transition?
It was very scary. Yeah, me and Emma Hayes had worked together for a long, long time, and as the game had grown and Chelsea had grown, she always I went back to uni when I was 27. And I played for Notts County at the time, and I did media and marketing because I'd been to multiple tournaments and seen lots of sponsorships come on board in the major tournaments, World Cups, Euros, etc., Olympics, and then all kind of disappear after that exciting bit had gone. I never really understood why. So I went back to uni when I was 27. Didn't figure it out, but had a good idea of what we could do. And then when I signed for Chelsea in 2017-18, me and Emma started discussing it. So when I left Chelsea and said I was going to retire, Emma was like, I want you to meet someone and I want you to help brands and sponsorship basically understand the role of an athlete, the role of a footballer, a football team, and how it's different from men's football. And then I think you can do that in like commercial management business style. And I looked at her and went, are you sure? And she was like, I think you're going to be perfect. So I met the director at the time who we just employed here at Chelsea. So she was our first women's only director, commercial director, and Zara Al-Qudsi. You might recognise Zara's name. She's now CRO at the new WSL franchise. And yeah, she basically interviewed me at Copper Club in Cobham. I slid in my CV, which said I worked at Kickers, T-Mobile, and played lots of football, which wasn't great. And I did go back to uni. I did have a doctorate in there as well. It was very nice. But again, I was kind of like, this woman's like come from the commercial director of Formula One, and she sat there looking at me being like, I've been given some dead athlete retiree that I'm going to have to try and... But the minute I spoke to her and basically told her what I wanted to do, she rang me an hour later and was like, I want to employ you. Then I panicked because I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have a real job. Also, I was enjoying playing golf and drinking lots of coffee in my 3 months of retirement that I had. But yeah, I absolutely adore it. And I must say, I think going back to what the guys have said so far is, as athletes, we are kind of pigeonholed. I think all that was for me was coaching or a physiotherapist. There were two things that you could be or would want to do. Or you just became, like most of the girls probably older than me were, teachers, doctors, like just normal jobs, like worked in shops, whatever, which is also fine. But for me, I think that our era, they're probably like me, Jill Scott, Steph Houghton's, Ellen White's, kind of started getting opportunities in and around the game, which meant that we could kind of tinker and explore what our personalities enjoyed and fitted. And that's one thing I would say is having those experiences throughout as the game grows has been super important, because you don't want to be everyone said to me, why don't you coach, Car? And I loved coaching. If I could be on an hour in the grass with the goalkeepers every day and go home, I'm done. That's great. But the stuff that surrounds it, I didn't really enjoy. I didn't want to do. But this I genuinely enjoy every single day, which is talking about the thing I did for my whole life, from its very infancy of 10 people watching to hundreds of thousands of people watching, millions of people watching, and trying to get people to understand why you would invest in a wonderful, beautiful game and in wonderful, beautiful women, in my opinion, because why would you not want to do that and create something that's so special alongside a brand that's already so relative in so many parts of the world in Chelsea, which is my job. I say invest in women's sport, teetotal, but Chelsea is my job. We have an amazing group of athletes that are my friends, but also now the people that I work for and I want to represent in the best possible way. And that has been my passion point, which means that I enjoy what I do every day and I'm able to access parts of the world because of who I am, what I've done. But also I think because I'm in a room full of people that want to understand why to invest, and I can speak to them as just a person rather than someone who's asking for money, it's a much bigger impact. Now that will go across people that enjoy social, TikTok, BBC, broadcast, whatever it is you want to do. I think when it comes to taking an athlete, if you find them being passionate about something, once we get passionate about something, it's very hard to stop us being very good at it, because that's all we've ever known. So I played football because I loved it and I wanted to be really damn good at it. Now you've took me into this role, I want to be really good at it, and I want my club and my job and me and my director and our CEO to be the best at it and represent Chelsea, but also women's football in the best possible way. I think that's what you get with former athletes, is that drive and that ambition to be the best at whatever we do, and always find ways, because that's all we've ever done in our careers. So that is what I do.
And obviously very well. And does that passion get converted in meetings, and is it received well? So I give an example recently. The AFC, which is the Asian Football Confederation, taking a bit of a focus to WiMENA, has launched its inaugural Women's World Cup. It was phenomenal. It was a historic match. The local team, Wuhan, equalised in the 94th minute and won on the 6th penalty. You can imagine the crowd, wait for it, of 12,000 people who came to see the match went mad. I was sitting beside both a young man on my left and a young one on my right, both from Wuhan. Neither could believe they'd attracted the crowd, nor that anyone would come from abroad to support the match. And it was Sarah Booth, who heads up women's football for AFC, who said, I don't think the world is ready for the explosion of women's football. And actually, more importantly, I don't think the world is ready for the explosion of women's sport. So to that point, is that passion received well by those that you're working with?
Yeah, and it's been, I'm not going to lie, it's been difficult. It's the club itself is on a journey, but so is women's football and women's sport. I think it's rugby are just about to experience a home tournament where you have an aspiration as a group of women. The Roses will be prepared to win that tournament. Now, is the infrastructure around it prepared for them when they win the tournament? And I think that's what happened when the Lionesses won. Yes, we knew that's what we wanted to do, or they wanted to do and achieve. And did we ever dream it would be as big as it has been? We thought it was going to be big, but probably not that big. So the infrastructure around it is still now catching up with the amount of girls that now want to play football, the amount of clubs and teams and everything that surrounds it in the ecosystem. Have we got enough of those things? Probably not. So I think that there is still that, as much as we're all passionate about it, I think we're still trying to figure out what it looks like and what it looks like going forward and how we harness it, keep the excitement going. And the girls going to the Euros this year will naturally create that excitement again. But then if they don't win, God forbid they don't, but hopefully they do. But if they don't, what does it look like after that? How do we bring it back? How do we keep talking about the athletes as people? How do we make them relatable? How do we connect our Lionesses to our Chelsea players? And I think that's probably been, I think passion is really important, but I think the hardest thing is getting people to convert. I sit in lots of rooms who want to invest in women, but then when it comes to actual a number that you put on the table, they're like, ooh. And I'm like, well, do you really want to invest in women? Because that's what our athletes deserve and cost. And I think everyone sees the excitement around it, but I think there's still that kind of uncertainty with it. So again, drawing data. We spent a lot of our time in the past couple of years drawing data to demonstrate how, by investing with this club especially, the return is incredible. And I think people are shocked at the return when you put it in front of them. But it is there, and it's just getting in the room with those people to, one, show your passion, but then demonstrate what you get on the return if you are a business or you are a fan or whatever it is you're investing into the game.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to actually come to you now, Lisa. However, I'm going to ask you to reflect on your previous job for a minute and keeping on the football theme. So Lisa was the Executive Director of Services for FIFA across 10 different specialism work streams, so she didn't sleep very much, managed to live through the World Cup in Qatar. When we talk about the passion of the game and the growth of women's football specifically, is your reflection from a FIFA perspective around the women's inspiration and those coming into a leadership position, or indeed even just into the workforce, having experienced it firsthand, do you still think that there's advantages that can be turned on their head to help those young athletes coming into that administrative role?
I think there's a big difference between the Men's World Cup from what I delivered in Qatar versus the experience that I had building and leading a team to deliver the Women's World Cup in Australia and New Zealand. The two were very different, and I enjoyed the Women's World Cup much more.
Why? Can you share the difference?
I think it was about the experience and seeing these young professional women achieve their lifelong ambitions. And I was pitch side when the trophy was lifted with Spain versus England, and seeing the England team this far away from me and the pure devastation in their faces was something where you see what they worked all their careers for was very different. And I never saw that in the Men's World Cup in Qatar. I think it was a very different vibe from it. But even also the teams that we built, the enthusiasm from the workforce team of delivering that tournament, they said they enjoyed much more than delivering the Men's World Cup in Qatar. But they both had very different challenges.
So I'm going to be really cheeky and ask you why.
Delivering events in the Middle East is very different than delivering events in the rest of the world. I've been in the region since 2015 and worked on various different mega events, from Expo 2020 to the World Police Games, where I was the only female in a room full of senior police officials who for the first 2 weeks of the project didn't speak to me, only through my translator. And then once I proved that I could do what I said I could do, the chairman never made another decision without involving me. And in the Middle East, it's about proving that you can't just say you can do something. You have to prove that you can do it. And that was the same in Qatar for the World Cup. I love the Middle East, and it was a very special experience to deliver the World Cup in a city of 8 stadiums. I drove over 6,000 kilometres in a month versus flying more than that across Australia and New Zealand. But I think the legacy from the Women's World Cup, where you saw every stadium sold out, the numbers that attended the opening matches in New Zealand and in Australia, and how that momentum carried right the way through. They delayed the 6 o'clock news in Australia because of the penalty shootout. So I think then off the back of the Women's World Cup, the legacy of it just propelled women's football to a new level. And I think the next Women's World Cup in Brazil will bring the next aspect to it as well.
And I think the world is joining that inspiration. I mean, if we reflect on, and I'll reflect on Saudi since we're talking about WiMENA, 70,000 young girls in 2 years are now playing as part of the school league in football. 30% increase in women officiating football. And a little small personal plug, NEOM FC women's team promoted to the Premier League. Sorry. I shouldn't have done that. I apologize now. For those young women that are coming through, we've talked about mentors quite a lot today, and coaches and people that inspire you, family, community, etc., etc. There are individuals who have sat on boards, and politicians are often looked to for advice. Tasmina, if you were advising a young person now around going into a leadership role with what you have seen, and as the first woman of colour ever elected to the Scottish, European, or indeed Westminster Parliament, I suspect you've got a few insights.
Thank you very much. Can I, first of all, before answering your excellent question, pay tribute to Laura and Tara and everyone involved in organising today. I just think if the world could look on just for a second into this room and see there's so much to hope for, and it's just so lovely to be in this environment. And the fact that Tara had to round people up who were having conversations outside to bring them in was just a testament to the amazing people that have been gathered here. Your question's a great one, GP, and there's such a long answer, or I'll try and give a shortened answer to it, because so much of what's been spoken about at the moment means so much to me, even just starting from your opening remarks about being on a board and what it's like when you're the first woman going into that room. And I would say to women athletes, and to women in general, we must value ourselves first and foremost, because what we tend to do, and it's natural, is go into a room and think that we have to be the person that says something that no one else has thought of. It's totally individual, totally new, so that they can appreciate why we are there. But our starting position must be that we are there because we are of worth and we are of value in the first place. And it's likely that people in that room will learn from us. Being in the House of Commons as a woman of colour, as you say, the first woman of colour, was challenging and difficult, and I faced many circumstances where I had to make on-the-spot decisions whilst in the chamber, knowing that my 3 daughters were watching me on television.
How old were they?
Well, now they're grown up.
But when they watched you on TV, how old were they?
About like 5 and 8, 10. And thinking when I was challenged, when I was speaking on various issues, obviously by men, one who it was a BBC News World story, barked at me, do you accept it or do you challenge it? And I thought, well, I can be someone who says, it's okay, it's the way it is, or I can be saying, no, that's actually not all right. So I, surprise you not, I took the no, that's not all right path and called them out on it. But the point is, valuing ourselves is very, very important. Challenging is very important, and that work's never going to stop. It's ongoing. And supporting each other to do that is also very important. There's lots of firsts in this room, and I'm just one of many brilliant, amazing stories. Our job, our role, our challenge is to make sure that we don't stop at the firsts. what we can do and what we can achieve for other women in our environments is make sure that we may have been the first, but we made sure that there were women coming up behind us and we didn't pull up the ladder, because I see so much of that across so many different fields. So value yourselves, women, and if you're moving from sport to different worlds, which is what this is all about, it's difficult because it's a completely different environment. However, what you have to offer is what that environment absolutely needs to be successful. So once you move away from the former, what you formerly were, think about what your future is and how your future can benefit and impact, people around you. And I think that's just a really important take. As I say, there's been so many inspiring stories. If there's a hashtag for today, it's Be Like Sarah, because she's just absolutely fantastic. Big smiling face. Smiling's good. Being happy is good and encourages people. So there's a lot we can learn from lessons from people here today. But understanding, that was the first thing I did, right, this is such a woman thing to do, is I looked at everyone's footwear when we sat down.
Yes, I did.
Right? Did you do that?
I was thinking they're all wearing comfy. What am I doing?
Yeah, exactly, right? But I make the point because when I was in Parliament talking about really important things like the disproportionate impact on women of war, a certain newspaper, we're not naming names, a certain newspaper decided to focus on what shoes I was wearing that day and not what I was saying. So I had a choice. Do I wear the footwear that nobody notices, or I just carry on being myself? And I decided to be myself and make sure I found a way that people would start listening to me, and they did.
Thank you. I think you've led me very nicely into the next topic of authenticity and integrity. And when you're told at the age of 25, 26, 27, by the way, you're going to go and be a chief executive, and you think, I'm going to be a chief executive. Good morning. Could we go to the first item on the agenda? When really inside you're going, let's rock and roll. Anybody want tea and coffee? What are we going to get done today? It's a very daunting prospect, especially when you're an athlete who, as you transition, and Carly, you could speak to this much more, which I'm going to come to you. When you get up in the morning and you're an athlete, your day is made out. You know exactly what you're going to do because your coach has said this is what you need to do, this is what you need to eat, when you need to eat it, what you need to do for the rest of the day. You enter the world of business and people sort of make assumptions. And so you, on occasion, people choose to play to be someone they're not. Carly, did you ever find yourself in a situation where you thought, I'm going down an avenue that feels very scary?
Yeah, immediately as I walked into the business room and thought, what am I doing here? No, but I do actually have some funny stories. First of all, exactly that. So my normal training day is that you turn up, I go for breakfast, I get changed, my kit's laid out, I go to breakfast, which is cooked for me. I then go into a meeting and I'm told what we need to do. I then go onto the pitch and I'm led by my coach, and then I come off and I'm told where lunch is, and then I get changed, and then I get told to go on S&C, and then I get to go home. I come into work and I was like, where's my laptop? And they were like, well, have you not gone and got it? And I was like, well, do I do that? Does someone not get that for me? So I have to get my laptop. Then I need to get a phone. Then I need to set myself up on a laptop. Never used Outlook. That was fun. Now I have an email address. Okay, that's cool. People are working, but they keep putting WFH, and I'm like, well, what the hell is that? Because I'm just in 9 till 5, because that's what I did at football. No one told me I had a day off if I didn't fancy coming into the office. So I could just, do a session at home if I wanted to. So quickly figured out that I could spend 2 days at working from home, which is really nice, actually, just not weekends. And yeah, I was just, my calendar, I'd be like, oh, Zara, like, where are we going next week? And she was like, look at your diary, Carly, you're in charge of it. And I was like, okay, sorry. And all that kind of stuff was just so new to me. But again, like, it was like, as athletes or former athletes, we love to learn. That's the thing that makes you be the best you can be, is you're constantly learning. If you just sit on what you did last year, last session, when you were good, when you had a good game, you're never going to get better. You're constantly being chased by the next kid behind you, or the next person who wants your shirt, or the next person who wants to be the best. So you're always having to learn the game all the time, and it's effectively what I had to do here. So I was starting from scratch. And one thing I did do is that I went around this whole business and introduced myself to everyone, because I didn't know everyone, and I knew at some point I was going to need people from different departments, and I couldn't just write on an email like, hi, I'm Carly, can I have this? I just felt that was wrong, and it's what I would have done in a changing room. So I went around and everyone was like, what? And then I'd walk in places like, we know who you are, Carly. And I was, yeah, but like, I do this. And they were like, it's really nice. No one ever comes to see us, and no one does that. And I'm like, but we're a team. Like, I don't understand, just because I'm a commercial manager at the women's team doesn't mean I'm not going to need ticketing, hospitality, facilities. Like, we're all one team, one club. And that's something that I tried to lead on in our women's department as we've built our team out, is again, the things that I know are needed for teams to succeed. Luckily, I've been part of like successful teams and seen the teams where we haven't been successful. So the things that I wasn't good at, I asked for help. I haven't got a problem with asking for help. It's another thing you have to do as an athlete. We can't do it all ourselves. Learned that very quickly, tried to do it. Was never going to do that by myself. Had to ask my coaches for help, had to knock on the door, ask my teammates, nutritionists. And without that, I wouldn't have been successful. It's the same in business. I don't think it should be a shameful thing to ask for help from a colleague or different parts of the business to be a better businesswoman. So doing that, and then I got up to speed with things, and I'm still learning now. It's still interesting to go, and I get imposter syndrome going and sitting in with CEOs of huge business and companies, and they go, and I was a footballer, like that's all I am, and they speak to lots of business people throughout the day, but they love to hear about my journey because I'm so different, and they want to know, like, what's it like being a teammate of Sam Kerr, or what's it like being in a changing room or playing at Wembley, and that's stuff that they don't get on a day-to-day either. So they're the things that make me stand out a little bit more and be a bit different. So using my journey and my past is also good to lean into, actually, okay, let's talk business and how am I going to get you into the business? So yeah, I think there's different ways you can use your athlete experience to take into business, and my winning mentality still exists in business now, and I think that's a key thing to have, or a key thing to want to have within your business if you want it to be successful. But then also I'll always be a sponge. I love to learn because I love doing what I'm doing. I think you asked 18-year-old Carly when I was doing my BTEC in sports science and why I only lasted a year with Jill Scott. Living with Jill Scott was probably the issue, but why I only lasted a year is because I didn't really care that much about it. I did sports science because I did sport, but I didn't really care for it, so I didn't last very long. The minute you put me into something I enjoyed, I was going to the library actively. I wanted to learn more. And it's the same in the job. So finding your passion, I think, allows you to open those doors and be more educated yourself. And that's kind of how I've, I guess, used my journey as an athlete, but then into business to hopefully be successful at what I do.
Thank you. I heard a fantastic phrase recently about athletes when they transition, that in the workforce, they are the ones who truly become the students of their industry, because to your point, they're continually wanting to be better. They want to learn what's going to help them. How do they change something that's in front of them that they don't like to see? So yeah, thank you. Rowena, I wonder if you could give us a bit of reflection on being one of 2 female athletes on the Sri Lankan National Sports Council, and how it felt to genuinely try and push that ecosystem for athletes and women.
Well, it was, first of all, an incredible experience because I sort of split, like some people in the audience today as well. I split multiple countries. So I grew up in the UK, but I'm very, very much Sri Lankan. I was privileged to represent my country at both junior and senior there. But Sri Lanka has always been an incredibly important part of my life. And having worked at the international level for a long time, I've always felt that federations can be very Western-centric in their approach and very much take that as the norm. And I just felt there was so much from Sri Lanka that I just sometimes felt that here in the UK we could learn for. It's one of the few countries where every child plays sport up to the age of 18. And I just thought that was an amazing achievement to have for a country that's incredibly poor. We don't perform well on the international stage because we don't have the resources that a lot of other countries have. But there's so much, and actually when I took on that role, I was working a lot with UK Sport, with the international relations team, because exactly for that reason. It was like, what can we actually learn from each other? But it was a really incredible experience for me. We were appointed during COVID, and it was a new government, a new sports minister who was actually an ex-athlete as well, and really wanted to drive change. There was so much. Our cricket team was also floundering at the time. There'd been this real shift, and so they appointed what was quite a groundbreaking National Sports Council, and we were all ex-athletes. Kumar, who was supposed to be here today, he was also, like, him and Mahela, 2 of our most decorated cricketers, people I grew up with, playing sport with. But equally, everyone, we had ex-basketball players, an ex-netball, the other woman was an ex-netballer, but they were also CEOs of businesses. And this is what's something that's amazing in Sri Lanka is that we had the first ever female Prime Minister in the world. We have the highest proportion, well, a very high proportion, not the highest, I can't quote that, of female CEOs. And, you know, when you talked about that 94% stat, which, by the way, is, I did a TED talk on this because I believe so strongly in this. I think that this is why we have so much success on the private side of industry in Sri Lanka, because every child plays sport. So girls and boys play sport up to that age. They learn all of those things that Carly was talking about, those lessons in teamwork, in confidence and resilience, and in learning how to lose and pick yourself up, like that adaptability that Adriana talked about earlier. And so it was amazing to be among this, but the challenge on the public side, it's still very Asian in its approach. So we'd never had women in these roles. So for myself and Kasturi to be appointed, and equally, you know, I was here in the UK, so it was a very, very public process, you know, and I was actually singled out because actually Kumar and I were working on changing the sports law at the time. So it was, for once, I actually felt quite a lot of hope that we were really actually empowered to make change. But it was also very daunting, you know. It was like there was a lot of pressure put on you as a group. I mean, there were still 24 of us, so, you know, and the structure as it was, we were approving teams, you know, and it became very, very bureaucratic, and that was the change that we were trying to make, because we were like, actually, there's so much more that we can be doing. But I think a really important part of that was that we'd all come from very different sports. We'd all played sport in the country. I'd had the luxury, and as a few of them, of having played elite sport outside as well, and having worked in the industry as well. But really being able to take those learnings into it. What transpired was, as much as I love to believe that sport isn't political, we went through a political change, well, a crisis actually, a few years ago, and half the council were very adamant about stepping down because they didn't want to be seen to be supporting the new government. The other half of us, and I was on the other half, were like, well, we weren't appointed politically, and what happens to the athletes? You know, the athletes are still, like, whoever's in charge of the government, at least having us there, we had strong voices. So we were fighting for something. But we couldn't split, because if half of us quit, it would look like half of us were pro the government and half of us were anti. So unfortunately, we all had to step down. But it was a real shame, because I think I had so many messages from people I knew, people I didn't know, who just felt this hope. That actually, and you know, I think a big part of it was being able to put us on the international stage as well. And so, and you know, it hasn't been the same. You know, they've appointed replacements, but it's not quite the impact. So, but it was a brilliant moment, and I really felt that it was this opportunity to really give back as well, which I think was important for all of us.
It's an intriguing reflection when individuals who, to use Carly's term, are at passion points, or they live in a passion industry. They do it because they care, not for any other reason. And then by default, they become role models because they're pushing for something that they believe in. And it's whether or not those that are around them as they come through that pathway recognize that sport plays a role in developing that passion and also that determination, which is critical for anyone to be able to achieve. As development director at the FA, when you were looking at the grassroots program and system, did you take into consideration the value of sport as a tool for positive social change and the future leaders that you were building, or was it purely about getting young people on the field of play and enjoying the game?
Both, to be honest. I think, you know, when I came into FA, there wasn't a pathway, and I think the first count of teams was 80 girls' teams. So there was a bit of that, but we knew that with the resources we had at the time, that making those strong connections about the value of what sport does, the impact that it can have that's wider than sport itself, was very powerful in attracting a lot of investment to match our pounds that we were investing as an FA. So we had a whole range of projects that were linked to sort of, you know, wider educational and social outcomes. So yeah, I think a bit of both, really, if I'm honest. I think it was sort of job one was pathway and opportunity, and then as you sort of built that out, it was about trying to really sell the value of that, to get more partnerships, to get more funding, to get more buy-in.
And as you move now outside of that sort of formal structure and into sort of subject matter expert for Portas and advising private equity clients and leagues, do you take that knowledge to them that grassroots is as important as elite and it gives them the pathway? Or how do you sell what you're trying to explain?
I think, a lot of my job for Portas is advising sort of global clients around either their whole women's football strategy. Well, of course, you're going to be a heavy push on building the base of the pathway and giving girls the opportunities that in many countries, they haven't previously had and the benefits of that. But even in when we're looking at more sort of professional systems and elite pathways, you have a look at the base and you can see in many countries that, for example, US have got a massive playing base. So they're sort of, for one, every sort of talented footballer to bring through, there's thousands and thousands of girls to pick from. So you're sort of doing both, really. But I think, we know that that women's playing sport brings so much, so much more than sport itself, and we're all, I think, sort of ambassadors of that and advocates of that, and trying to drive that message where just playing football for the enjoyment's sake and having fair and equal opportunities isn't enough to get people on side. So a bit of both, I guess.
Thank you. Lisa, when you've had quite an international exposure, I would say, to both athletes transitioning into the workforce. You are heralded across the industry of someone who creates solid, robust teams for both athletes transitioning into the workforce, but equally those who would have liked to have seen themselves on the field of play, but possibly didn't quite make it, so they've chosen their passion industry as an administrator. Can you reflect a little bit on what you think those strengths are between both?
I think from building high-performance teams to deliver. My athletic career started and stopped in high school, but I was captain of every sports team, and I think that carries through. Going back earlier to the point of who better to know what an athlete needs than somebody who's been an athlete. If I think about the people that I worked with at FIFA, Sarai Barryman is the Chief Women's Football Officer. So she was a professional footballer and now has a huge impact in regards of what happens with women's football. She also humanises FIFA. She is probably one of the funniest people that I have ever worked with, and she did a podcast in New Zealand at the Women's World Cup called Between Two Beers. If you've not listened to it, listen to it, and it talks about, she talks about her story, about how she ended up in senior leadership in FIFA, and swears every other word. You've worked with Sarai, so but she is an absolute pleasure to work with. But I think going back to the point of who knows better than what an athlete needs than an athlete. Plus, the sports ecosystem is huge. FIFA has over 60 different functional areas that contribute to delivering men's and women's World Cups, some of which that you wouldn't even think would have that role, all which bring different skill sets. I didn't come from the football world when I joined FIFA, and you talking earlier about you changing your career 3 times. I started out as a secretary and then ended up in facilities management as part of my role, and that was for a sports brand. That was everything that nobody else wanted to do, including a conference. And that was how I then got into the events world. Developing on from that, they sponsored one of the international federations for the Olympics. And my first exposure to major sporting events was working at Athens 2004. I remember sitting at the opening ceremony going, oh, I'm at the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games and I'm being paid to be here in my very early 20s. To then my role in FIFA. From that very first moment that I applied for the role, that job was mine. And everybody asked after I got that role, which was a series of 10.5 hours of interviews, over 5 interviews over 3 months. Who did you know to get your job? I didn't know anybody in FIFA to get my job. I got it off my own merit. And if I can do it, anybody else can. And I think from that, and I get a lot of messages from young girls and women on LinkedIn about how did I end up in my career. And for me, any female in senior leadership owe it to the next generation to help mentor them, to bring them through, so in order that they can be the next senior leadership in the sports industry.
Thank you.
Well, you said something really interesting about only the athletes really know what the athletes need, and that is so true. When I was trying to steer the Women's Super League through COVID, and there was pressure from the media to try and come back immediately. The men were coming back, and everything was like, oh, we're going to do this testing, we're going to do these protocols, we're going to get this money from the government, and head down. And then I called the captains' meeting, they went, we don't want to come back, we don't feel safe. And I went, oh my God, oh, okay, right, okay, different strategy. And we've been so buried in it that, you know, the moment we heard the player voices, we completely changed strategy, fortunately, not too far down the line. And, you know, not often enough is there a systemic sort of way of getting those voices into the conversations. I think absolutely spot on.
It's interesting that you both reflect on it, and your comment earlier was how difficult it is to be truly athlete-centric and ensure that those voices are heard in a strategic way. We heard earlier on from the Deputy Minister, Adwa Arifi, there are 3 women in Saudi Arabia who have been instrumental in enabling women's football, and all of them came from 5 women who kicked a ball around behind the scenes, and they have grown an industry. We see with us today, we have a skier, a high-performance skier from Saudi Arabia sitting in our midst. Who would have ever thought that we'd be saying things like that? There are women across the world that are inspirations, and if we listen to their voices and what they need to be able to continue, 2 young children, how do you take that next step? How do you think about your kids and what you're trying to do on the field of play, and the fact you'd like to be the chairman of the board, and. You walk in as a commercial manager for the first time, and how do you know how to behave? Did we prep them? Did we take them in that direction? Are they ready for that transition? Because we seem to be the only industry that expects our high achievers to give back and know what they're doing outside the field of play. It's a curious observation. There's no other industry. You know, you don't see someone who makes widgets in a factory and does it to the best of their ability and is the best widget maker going onto the field of play and trying to score a goal against Carly. It's just an interesting observation, isn't it, about the industry? I'm running out of time. Tasmina, could I just bring you back in for one final question? For someone who has seen both politics, boardrooms, had a lot of exposure to women, and obviously feel very, very passionately that you have a job to bring women with you, what would be your advice to young female athletes who are considering retiring and entering the dark side?
That if they enter the dark side, it will become the light side.
Good advice.
And to say that they are perfectly placed to make that transition, and there are people around who are happy to support that, because they are born leaders, absolutely. Their sport has given them a discipline. They understand about discipline. We, women, understand about discipline, about learning. We're not afraid to learn. We're team players. All of these things are positive for us in boardroom scenarios, and therefore we have so much to give. And if I may just give a nod, you gave me actually quite a smooth transition into one point.
I did it on purpose.
I wanted to make, which is about Muslim women in sport and hijab-wearing women in sport, because they are absolute role models for the Muslim world. For Muslim women face in all walks of life serious misconceptions about who we are, what we stand for, and some level of oppression which doesn't exist. And it's really great to see women in sport demonstrating that, and so well. And you have to manage these conversations. There was a period, and it's ongoing, of questions about, women who wear hijab. And one of our jobs, a job I saw as a parliamentarian, was to change the framing of that question. So I actually had a debate in Parliament on national hijab. There is a National Hijab Awareness Day. So I deliberately had a debate in the House of Commons on it, but I framed it as simply saying, do you believe that a woman has a right to wear what she wants? And nobody can say no. Not really, not if they're brave. So they said yes. So it is women's choice to wear what she wants to wear. And if you see things through that prism, it's very important. So I think into the world of boardrooms where really serious decisions are made about the future of sport, where funding might come from. And any other decisions at corporate level, it's very important to have women in the room who have life experience, women also who may be mothers, because that's another thing we have to touch on. When in your career are you having children? And so, but these are all positives. So I would say to women in sport looking for a career afterwards, the doors are open for you. There's a huge support network they can even gather from the women in this room. You're absolutely in the right place to be doing it. This country and beyond, all the countries that are represented here, the MENA region needs for you to be doing it, and therefore you must do it. And there's never a right time for anything, I would say. Once you've done your sporting life, you just get on with it and you just do it and you just fly with it. And then it'll work, because there's lots of women who will be inspired by you, and it's necessary for you to do so. And the younger generation, just for their benefit, they also need really good role models. Leadership comes naturally from sports people, because they're successful in their careers. People feel that they know them. The ordinary people feel that they know them and trust them. And so they're already ahead of the game in how they are perceived by people. That should therefore be used to their advantage.
Thank you very much. As one of the ordinary people, I have learned a great deal this afternoon. Thank you very much to the five of you. I have got 3 minutes and 27 seconds left. There was a pre-question. Tracy. Have we got a mic we could get to Tracy? Would that be all right? Thank you.
Thanks, and thank you, Jan. And Carly, I just want to say I heard every word you mentioned earlier on about the first few days in your workplace. I'm a mind management coach, and I support people with that career elevation and career transition. So what Carly mentioned earlier on, I see it often in my sessions. So when we look at career transition, I'm still surprised about how discombobulated it still is within the various sports industries. Now, thinking about the high rates of divorce and bankruptcy within the men's sports, I hosted my first player care webinar in 2019, when back in that time, I think divorce and bankruptcy was about 40%, and I know the divorce rates have gone higher post-career. For some reason, though, I don't feel that that's going to be the same case for women's football. Sorry, guys. But on a serious note as well, when we look at, this is 6 years on, and there's still a lack of consistency within the education around managing these pivotal transitions within the sports industry. And it's difficult to understand your purpose and your why within the next phase of your career, when you're still in this career and you need to keep your eye on the ball. So I know from my coaching sessions, people find it difficult to balance that. So I feel that there's a big educational piece missing for the career piece itself. So rather than waiting for that transition, I feel that there's an educational piece missing throughout the career piece, which I do have the answer, and it's sat on my laptop, but that's not a sales pitch, sorry. So my question...
After. Everyone go and see Tracy for coffee after.
Yeah. So my question is, what strategies or initiatives do you believe that sports organisations could prioritise better to create a more consistent and effective framework for athlete transition?
Sorry.
Big old question. No, it's something that I'm very passionate about, and being one of the older players, knowing that I was going to have to work and I needed to invest back in my career, when the youngsters started coming through, the Aggie Beaver Jones, and they get excited, they get a little bit of money, and they start turning up with their Louis Vuitton wash bags and their Gucci belts. And I'm like, guys, what are you spending your money on? Have you invested it? But I think it's just even an education from some of the older players, because again, you're so invested in just winning and then the successes that come from that. And it's really nice to finally have some money and get a nice car or buy property. So at Chelsea, we're trying to put things in place, whether that's we're linking with either banking or wealth management to make sure they're investing the money, and are they looking after themselves and how are they investing in their futures. Careers are very short in sport. I was looking to do it for a long time, but only professionally, probably for about 10 years. Some of their careers will be that long, maybe shorter, depending on their injuries. So it's trying to make sure they're also upskilling themselves along the way. So what are they passionate about, and how can we as an organisation help them? Now we have kind of people in place like myself, like Julia, who's the commercial director, Aki, who's our CEO. We have a social media manager, marketing manager in the women's game. So we spoke to the girls that did their ACLs, like when they're coming back off their ACLs and they've got more time, do you want to come into the office and see what we do? Do you want to see how we work? Is it something you're interested in? Try and sit with different parts of the business to see if anything takes your fancy. Or do you want to just do your A license, which the PFA do really well? PFA go into the clubs, offer their B license, their A licenses if they want to be coaches. But I think that needs to be on a broader scheme. That's probably something the PFA are looking into. Is it's not just probably coaching and physio that they should be offering. There's all these other, and I think they do media as well. I think they should try and look at different kind of parts of the organisation of a club. We have lawyers, we have hospitality staff, we have catering, we have all these different points that we don't really talk about that are around the ecosystem of the game outside. So then it's an education piece internally, because even the girls don't know what some of the people do when we bring them in. They're just like, oh, what do they do? I'm like, oh, they're in charge of merchandise. Like, well, how do you get into that? That means that could I do something like that? And you're like, yeah, you could if you wanted to. But again, it's explaining to them. So a lot of it's an education to them as well. And I'm constantly sounding like their mum or their big sister, because I'm like, what do you do with your money? What are you spending it on? Are you doing classes outside? And a lot of them are. A lot of them have their businesses. They go back to uni and they're doing stuff like that. And I'm very passionate that I want them to have something outside, because even mentally, you're so consumed, especially at a club like ours, with winning and pitch. Sometimes it's nice to just take yourself away from Chelsea and the carnage it is and just put your head in a book, or put yourself in, I don't know, learn to do a nail technician if you're into nails, or I don't know, whatever it is you are. Sometimes it's good to have that escape, because football won't be there forever, and it also won't always bring you joy. It's joyous when you're winning. It's joyous when you're playing well, but that is not consistent for 10 years or the 15 years of your career. So when it's not going well, have you got something to fall back on that is a passion point that does bring you joy? And that could be just something as little as going back to education, investing in your money outside of it, giving back to your family, doing a charity, I don't know, whatever it is, but giving the girls the tools to be able to feel like they can do that whilst they're still playing is really important to a club like ours.
Can I just add to that as well? I think there can be a lot better collaboration between sporting organisations. I mean, every athlete will transition. That's a known. And I think up until now, I think it's great that Chelsea are doing that. A lot of clubs don't. They just focus on their playing careers and what they're doing right now. I am an ambassador for the Switch to Play Foundation, which is a charity focusing on supporting athletes in their transition phase, but they also do work with athletes pre that, to your point exactly, like we don't just wait for the point when they're deciding to retire, because then you do have that panic, what's my purpose, what am I going to do next? And I think, there's a lot of different player associations of all the different sports, and actually I think if they all work together, there's a lot more that we can do. There's resources out there. Barclays have Eagle Labs Academy, which help entrepreneurs. That's accessible by athletes. Like anyone can get these resources. But if we all pull together, I think we'll find there's so many resources out there already. It's just that people don't know they're there. And so I think that is on the sports organisations to really be much more collaborative in the space.
I feel there's a nub of an idea here, you two.
We keep talking about it. We need to talk.
Kelly, did you want to add?
No, I think I said it earlier, really, to be honest, about I think it needs to be more systemic. It needs to be, I think you said, somebody said pigeonholed earlier, and that we've been sort of athletes been pigeonholed into certain elements, but not getting support to take that broader view and see the broader options. And the induction was hilarious. I'm still laughing at your first day, Carly, in your job, and I'm sort of thinking, where's the buddying, the mentoring, the inductions, how are we supporting these athletes to
the handover?
So plenty more to do.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tracy. We've got time for one last question. Laura's giving me the yes, even though I'm in red time up here.
So we've talked a lot about, obviously, the athlete to leader, but what's been really clear from me in this panel is there's so many opportunities to work in sport, even if you're not able to compete at an elite level. I've got a 9-year-old girl, so I'm very much looking to how do I inspire into something that's been my passion. But also, she's not allowed Instagram. She's not allowed Snapchat. She's not allowed TikTok. She's 9. I don't trust her yet with it. How do I tell her these stories? How do I inspire her to look at a career in sport, maybe playing, but to become a coach or a physio or a marketing person or a lawyer? How do I inspire her from what I've heard today when I won't give her Instagram?
Right, Instagram-less society. Go for it, Rowena.
Well, I was going to just say athletes are overachievers, but already planning that at age of 9 is pretty impressive.
Tasmina.
I think one way perhaps, and I totally understand why you want to keep it away from social media, I think more documentaries, more stories about people who have achieved that you can safely watch on television is a really good way to inspire young girls, and I hope to see more of that. There has been some of it, but clearly not enough of it. And as you say, there are many opportunities, also opportunities, you know, as I became a board member of Scottish Women in Sport. It's difficult being a Scot and being in sport. You do know that. we have minimal success. We try, we have the spirit. But again, that's an opportunity to give, Carly's going to come in with that. Go on.
A certain Kim Little did win even though I'm at Chelsea, she did win a Champions League at the weekend. Very successful Scottish football player.
We'll take it. We'll take it. So there are so many ways, even getting involved in boards, particularly around young girls, which is what the focus was on in Scottish Women in Sport, was where are we losing young girls' interest in sport? What is happening in schools that the interest is taken away? And a lot of that is because social media is sucking up the brain span of our young people, of our children, when we want them to be exercised on something more positive. So I do hope, I mean, I do films and TV myself, we should think about making more positive programmes that you can watch safely with your children.
Can I also tell you about the organisation Rebel Girls? It's actually an American organisation, but they've also branched out to create Rebel Girls Sport, and their motto is building confident young girls. And they tell stories in Once Upon a Time. So you've got Michaela Schifrin's Once Upon a Time story about how she started out as an athlete and became one of the most decorated skiers of all time. But they do that not only just for athletes, but they do it for politicians, for eminent women in society. But they do it in a way that the girls can relate to. They're now branching into sport to do it, to expand also, to tell the stories in sport and to communicate how to watch sport in a different way as well. But I think that there are a lot of initiatives out there like that are just telling stories off social media as well.
Is she allowed YouTube? Kids YouTube. Yeah, I don't know whether we're on that, but we've tried really hard with a podcast. And that's not just to introduce the girls and their stories, but actually the people behind that. So that is the staff. I think I'm on last year's. But kind of, again, just opening out the business. So how do we operate as a business, and who are the people behind the team as well as in the team, and their stories and how we got to this place. A lot of the guys come from men's football into women's football, and why this question's asked, but a lot of the women, how did they end up at Chelsea, and what journeys were they all on singly or collectively? So I think we've tried to give an insight into those kind of roles and responsibilities that exist in our ecosystem. But again, we're trying to grow that out. It's very difficult when, to be fair, these jobs have just started existing as well for a lot of the team, which is really exciting. But I think there's a lot more opportunities. I think we've discussed it internally of talking about how a business is run and what women do within that business. We have I was surprised at how many women are actually within the Chelsea business in a nice way. It was really nice to see kind of so many women in and around. But how do we tell their stories, their journeys? How did they end up? A lot of them come from lawyers into directors into different ways, because the women's side of the business didn't exist, and now it does. So now they get to do two things that they're really passionate about. But how do we bring those stories to life and put them on a platform where people can access from all different ages and bring them to life? So it's something we're very conscious of, but we're trying to build out. And again, I don't know if our little podcast exists on Kids Podcast, but it's maybe something you could watch with her as a little bonding session of the athletes and obviously the careers that surround it.
Yeah, we just add to that. I think when you're encouraging young people into sport, it's fantastic to see the role models and the success. I think the podcasts that are probably the most enlightening are those that address that it's okay to lose. And how do you deal with being frightened for the first time when you walk out to try a new sport and you've not done it before, but your friends are really good at it? It's probably worthwhile trying to balance a bit. And I often find that high-performance athletes are the best in articulating loss and in articulating how they've overcome fear. Could I please say thank you to an extraordinary panel? It's not very often that you get to spend a day doing this, and this is a work day. How lovely is that? I would like to leave you with one thing, if that's all right. Sorry, Katie. And I'm only going to do it. Sadly, I chose to do it when I could read well with the right glasses. So if I stumble, I apologize now. I was talking to someone who recently retired, who's currently going through transition and has been asked to chair an organization and is terrified. And she sat down and said, I'm trying to learn how to deal with my fear and I don't know what to do, but I found this. It said that before entering the sea, a river trembles with fear. She looks back at the path she has travelled from the peaks of the mountains, the long winding road crossing forests and villages, and in front of her sees an ocean so vast that to enter there seems nothing more than to disappear into forever. But there is no way back. The river cannot go back. No one can go back. To go back is impossible in existence. The river needs to take the risk of entering the ocean, because only then will fear disappear, because that's when the river will know it's not about disappearing into the ocean, but becoming the ocean. If you're a river or you're already in the ocean, encourage those who are still the river. And if you're in the river, look up, because there's lots of people in that ocean asking you to come and join them. Thank you to the panel.
Thank you.